Hey, I'm Scotty Dunn. Let's talk about the Santa Clauses. The Santa Clauses is now a full-blown franchise. It started in 1994 with Tim Allen with The Santa Claus. 2 feature films after that, and then a 16-year break from the third movie, and you've got The Santa Clauses, which is a Disney Plus series, a limited series, and they released 2 episodes recently, which I took the time to see. But before I get into my thoughts on that, let's start at the beginning with Tim Allen's 1994 feature film, which came along at a time when home improvement was big. He was just 1 year away from Toy Story. Tim Allen became a prominent star of the 90s. And I saw this movie with a friend and his family, and I enjoyed it. It has the holiday spirit to it, and also in Tim Allen, it had a sarcastic lead who became Santa Claus, and I thought it worked well. The balance between sweet and sarcastic was good. But leading up to this video, I watched all 3 feature films and the first 2 episodes of the show, and I noticed something. This movie has a dark element to it. It's about a guy who accidentally startles Santa Claus who's on his roof, and Santa Claus falls to the ground and dies. Scott Calvin, who's trying to impress his son, takes Santa Claus's clothes, puts them on, delivers some packages, and finds out a nasty truth. He is now Santa Claus, without signing any contracts or anything. Yeah, it's crazy stuff. Scott Calvin is a guy who's trying to reconnect with his son. He's sort of self-absorbed. He's divorced from Charlie's mom. Charlie's mom is married to a guy named Neil. He wears sweaters. It's cool. It's cute. He learns in the movie to be a better father, but also the father of Christmas. From the moment he decides to steal the sleigh and Santa's clothes, everything seems fine, He's taken to the North Pole with Charlie. It's there, though, that he finds out how deep this rabbit hole goes. Apparently, he is now going to be Santa until someone kills him. I sometimes think about what a sequel could have been if it was about this elite assassination group who's actively trying to kill Santa Claus so that they can become him and rule the world. But that didn't happen. So Santa Claus finds out this is his full-time job now. When he goes back home, he thinks he was dreaming, but Scott Calvin finds out that he is physically turning into Santa Claus. It wasn't a dream. The North Pole was not a dream. He starts gaining weight rapidly. Not only that, when he shaves, it doesn't stay. He's got to have the beard. A beard should be a choice, but it's not for Scott Calvin. He's gone prematurely gray, or white. Actually, he's got white hair. It grows fast. He's fat, and he didn't ask for any of this. He didn't sign any contract. I mean, he should sue, but who's he gonna sue? Who is running the North Pole anyway? Feels governmental, but I don't know. I don't have my Santa hat, and I don't have my conspiracy hat. I don't have enough tinfoil. I was making something to eat. I think I was making some fries or something. Also, this new job that Scott Calvin finds himself with is ruining his current job as like a head position at a toy company. He goes there, can't fit into his clothes anymore because of stuff. He even has to lie and said he was stung by a bee, a big bee. And everyone's kind of shocked by his appearance. We never see him go to work again, but safe to say he lost his job. Not only that, the cops become aware of him, this guy calling himself Santa Claus, and there's a manhunt for this guy. There's a manhunt for Scott Calvin. Why? Because some guy died on his property. Well, maybe that was his fault, inadvertently. But anyway, to add to all of this, he loses custody of Charlie. I mean, they're not straightforward about anything. They have this little card with all of the terms of acceptance, and they're small as hell. It says, if you accept these terms, you will lose everything that you love. Also, how are they paying Scott Calvin? Like, how are they paying him? Really? I don't see any cash. It's just strange. Yeah, I know you lost your job and the custody of your kid and your figure, but hey, is that not pretty good cocoa? So we end up with Santa Claus 2. It's been years since the first one. He's into the groove of being a cult leader of the North Pole. He finds out that there's another Claus. There's another Santa Claus. By the way, this should have been called the Santa Claus 2, the Mrs. Claus. Because what happens is Scott Calvin finds out if he doesn't marry in 28 days on Christmas Eve, that he's gonna lose everything he's got. He's not gonna be Santa anymore. He doesn't have the magical perks that he has now, and he's gonna have to move back home. Home where he doesn't have a home anymore or a job because he was inducted into this cult so suddenly. They take everything, then they threaten you a little more. If you don't get a wife for some reason, you're out. This is a culture of fear at the North Pole. And also, why does it matter if he has a wife? Anyway, he goes back home and he starts looking for a wife. the number one candidate on his list turns out to be the principal at Charlie's school. By the way, Charlie is becoming rebellious. He's starting to break into school, and he's starting to graffiti the walls with the Christmas spirit. So Scott Calvin starts crushing hard on the principal of the school and starts using his magic, and I'm not just talking charisma, I'm talking real magic. He makes it snow. He gives gifts to the faculty at a party they go to together. Oh yeah, by the way, there's like a robot version of Santa back at the North Pole going power crazy. Long story short, Santa Claus brings the new candidate to the North Pole, and the instant they get married, Scott Calvin gains all the weight back, turns old again. And Mrs. Claus is just like, oh. Usually a husband or wife waits a few years before they put on the love pounds, but Scott Calvin's like, nope. And by the way, Mrs. Santa Claus doesn't turn fat. Her body doesn't transform like it does for Scott Calvin. That's a double standard, don't you think? Okay, well, actually at the end, there is like a 30-second part where she's wearing a fat suit, but I can tell from there on, the actress or the people in charge were like, yeah, no more fat suit. Just be you. So we end up at the Santa Claus 3, the escape clause. In this one, Mrs. Santa Claus is pregnant with Santa's baby, and she's a little homesick. She wants to see her parents. Well, Scott Calvin, being the leader of a cult, doesn't want her to go back home, but he can bring home to the North Pole. So he and his buddy Sandy, the Sandman, go to visit his in-laws, and Sandy throws some drugs at them in the form of Z's. They get conked out, and Santa kidnaps them to take them to the North Pole. When they wake up, he informs them that it's Canada. He can't stop lying. See, these are what you want to look for when you're looking for someone who's in a cult. You've also got Jack Frost, who's like the black sheep of this magical community of people. Jack Frost comes in, he's not happy about stuff. He's played by Martin Short, and Martin Short is pretty funny in it. He's always a welcome addition to me. Anyway, one thing leads to another. They go back in time to 1994 when the first movie took place and Santa fell off the roof. They both are there. They could totally stop this horrific death from the first movie, but they wait until Santa proceeds to fall off and die again. Then they both try and get his coat, the dead Santa's coat, so that they can become Santa. What kind of blatant disregard for life do you have to only care about wearing the dead fat guy's suit? It's messed up. Anyway, Jack Frost becomes Santa Claus for a little bit, and the only thing he really changes is he finds out better ways to monetize the North Pole. Alright, well, basically, Scott Calvin fixes everything. He tricks Jack Frost into blah, 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 blah. Scott Calvin is Santa Claus again. Mrs. Claus has a baby. The end. So just looking at those three movies, obviously the first one is the better one. The first one has the right tone. It's funny, it's sarcastic, but it's sweet. The second one goes into G-rated territory, and it's a little more for kids. It loses more of that sarcastic wit. By the third one, we're in full fairy tale mode. You got Jack Frost and all this time travel stuff. But, I'm a father now, and I take it way easier on these cheesy movies. If it makes me laugh a couple times, they're okay. So here we are, 16 years later, after Escape Clause, and we've got the Disney Plus series. Everything gets a sequel series over at Disney. I think, personally, they probably could have just made a feature film sequel direct to Disney Plus. But so anyway, like I said, Disney Plus released the first 2 episodes, and I watched those. Let's start off with what's happening in this new series. Scott Calvin has been Santa Claus for a long time, but he's losing his magic. He doesn't care as much. He's starting to lose his passion for being Santa. He's getting older. I know he may have turned old when he was 35 because of this manipulative cult called the North Pole, but now he's actually 65. He's also realizing the world is changing around him. People don't need Santa Claus, they need Amazon. With a click of a mouse, you've got the gifts you want. Also, there's this scene where Santa's at a board meeting, talking with some HR elf. She basically informs him that they don't have a naughty list anymore because it's not politically correct. It would be rude not to include naughty kids. So there's no naughty list. Everyone gets a gift. Santa Claus and Mrs. Santa Claus have 2 kids now. One of them is played by the real-life daughter of Tim Allen, and this guy is an actor. Anyway, they have no friends. They don't know what it's like to live a normal life. Not only that, Mrs. Santa Claus is lamenting her life and her role. She's disappointed with the way that Mrs. Claus is portrayed. You know, a yes woman, just doing whatever, you know, Santa Claus wants, looking homely. And I'm like, she doesn't even look homely, you know, she doesn't. You know, she looks great. She looks fine. But she's mad about it. She doesn't feel like she's needed. She also starts forgetting her name, which is one of the first things that happens when you're in a cult. You start losing association. You're Mrs. Claus. I think it's Carol. It's Carol. Yeah. What's new? Santa Claus has an assistant that goes on deliveries with him, but he doesn't actually drive the sleigh, and he never goes down the chimney with him, so he just kind of sits there. I guess they're best friends now. Charlie makes an appearance. He's an older guy now. He's got a wife and kids, and Scott Calvin wants Charlie to take over the family business, but Charlie's wife says, no, not gonna happen. So Scott Calvin's disappointed, and the search continues for who will be the new Santa.
Hey, yeah, I was looking at the footage and the ending was corrupt, but that's okay because Buffy suggests that you just watch the first one. It's the best one in the series. But if you're feeling like anything Christmas will do, well then the rest of the franchise will do as well. Right? What? Really? Which one is your favorite in the franchise? Did you ever notice the culty vibes when you watched it? Let's talk in the comment section below. Bye.